Remember, John, like I connected with that music on the inside because I felt dead inside. The music spoke to what was inside of me. And so I began cutting myself, and it was the only thing I had control over. And it was a reminder that I was alive, that I was seeking in the drugs and found in the drugs temporarily. I walked outside. I remember the fluorescent lights at the university were brighter. I walk outside, the grass is greener, the sky is bluer, and I'm like, what is going on? But one thing that I know is that my heart was burning. $20 in my pocket when my stepdad dropped me off at the airport. He just said, good luck, kid. And I was just like, okay. I feel like this was like my first prayer in a way. And I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but God doesn't need anybody to be like in any way for us to come to him at all. So it's like he came to protect my life.
Cristina Baker, my friend, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm super excited for many reasons.
Well, I'm excited for one primary reason is I get to introduce my new friend to my friends around the world. And this podcast began in a way, now we're about 800 in, that not one before this has. You prayed for me. So that warms my heart. I think it's going to warm the water in this conversation. And for those who are hearing the name Cristina Baker for the very first time, and maybe they missed my introduction of you, if you had to introduce yourself to this audience, what would you say?
I would say I am just a person that I feel like I'm kind of bumping around in life, kind of like a bumper car, and just holding on to the strength of God through every single moment, and recognizing at this point in my life that he always comes through.
Hmm.
So he's been teaching me that. But in terms of who I am, I'm a mom, a wife. I love my family so much. I will get into that, I'm sure, but they are the gift that I never felt I would get or deserved. I'm very thankful. I'm thankful to be alive every day. And I get reminded of that every day too.
I love that. And I'm also moved by the fact that you are grateful to be alive every day. So am I. It blows my mind that the vast majority of us aren't. We take for granted life, of course, and our freedoms, of course, and our abilities and our talents and our time, of course. You don't because of where you came from. So I'm going to reverse away from the station a little bit, back to your childhood. I grew up in the Midwest, still live here. You grew up in Bolivia, of all places. So first of all, on the map of the world, how can we find Bolivia, and what brought your family there?
Well, my mother's Paraguayan, so I didn't speak English until 6 years old. She was a stay-at-home mom. And my dad was the son of a Peruvian, so my dad speaks 5 languages, was raised in Switzerland, Italy, played basketball for Notre Dame, and very well-to-do family. And my mom coming here to this country, she learned how to speak English, she says, through Sesame Street. Like, okay. Um, so
Hopefully
it
she doesn't
really,
do the
she's
Elmo accents and the Cookie Monster, Cookie.
so the earliest memories of my childhood, John, were my dad's an entertainer. He sold oil heads for a large oil and gas company that is still around today, but he's very successful. He was just a really good salesman, and he knew how to capture people's hearts. I remember telling his boss a few months ago, my dad went on life support actually last year when I began editing my second book, and he said, you know what made your dad so good was he never took no for an answer, and he knew how to win hearts.
Mhm.
I just thought about that. He was an atheist most of his life, and my mom was a non-practicing Catholic. In South America, women stayed home, which is nothing wrong with that, and raised children. And especially in the South American culture, it's a very more macho,
Yes.
no offense to anybody, but just the man is in charge. And so she loved us. And when they would entertain a lot of executives, and we had 5 physicians in the family, so it was kind of the upper echelon of that society of Houston at the time in the 80s, early 90s. So I just remember that whenever the party was on, my dad played every guitar. He's classically trained. He was an entertainer and he was just a very different person when people are around. And my mom as well, they could work a room. And it's kind of rare to see an extrovert and an extrovert together, but they were very good together when the people were around. But I remember being with them at 4 o'clock in the morning, dancing to like Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. 4 years old, right in the middle of all the adults. And when the party was over and everybody would go home, life would change. So on the outside, it was like everything looked good. Beautiful home, all the nice cars. But on the inside, it was felt dark and sad. And for me as a child,
Yeah.
so I always wanted the party to never finish. I never wanted the parties to finish. I always wanted the party to continue, which kind of leads into, what I'll share with you in a moment. So
I think we should just jump
my
right into it. I was thinking about your story and thinking about what was I doing at 14, and about the most reckless thing I was doing at 14 was sneaking out of the house at about 2 in the morning and TPing one of my buddy's house with a few of my friends. Like that was the reckless behavior that wild man John O'Leary was doing. You were a little bit more wild at 14. Tell our listeners not only what you were doing, but like what do you think it was that was motivating it?
Well, I was abused, not directly by my father, immediate family member, but my dad had a double life, did a lot of cocaine and was still very successful, but he was abusive towards my mom when he would do drugs. And so she finally left him, remarried a man that worked for the FDIC, and he was Bolivian. So, in terms of the map, Bolivia is in the heart of South America, right next to Paraguay, which is where my mom's from. So the rude awakening came where I was on summer vacation in Paraguay, and my mom called me and said, "You're not coming back to the States. You're going to La Paz, Bolivia." And I'm like, I spoke Spanish, but I grammatically could not get by. And I'm like, that's where I remember just feeling like my world just kind of jolted.
Right.
So we get to Bolivia. And my stepdad began to change. I mean, he had three kids that weren't his own, had one that was his own. And we were wild kids. I mean, my grandfather would always call me Hurricane. I was wild. My younger brother was wild. And I think he wasn't ready for that, nor was he prepared for the depths of what we had already gone through as children. So I started getting into Marilyn Manson. It was around the time of the Columbine massacre. And I just remember, John, like I connected with that music on the inside because of I felt dead inside. The music spoke to what was inside of me. And so I began cutting myself and we lived in the Amazon, super hot. This would sound strange to a lot of people, but it was my only, without using any vulgarity or anything, it was my only, it was the only thing I had control over. And it was a reminder that I was alive.
Hmm.
And so I then found kids that were kind of like me in Bolivia, the goth kids, and we got involved. I became the lead singer of a punk band, metal band, and now I found this other drug, like I feel accepted. What's that question of everybody has is, will you love me at my worst? And will you accept me for who I am? And I found that in these kids, but there's no drinking age in Bolivia at 14. So I was smoking, drinking, going out to whatever time I wanted. And all of that, I believe that the divorce and all the things that had happened was starting now to bubble up to the surface, but not as a full volcano. So
Right.
rubber meets the road moment at that point was I'm coming home and my stepfather's standing at the foot of the stairs. I kind of tried to shrug him before I walked by him. And right before he pushed me down the steps, he said, "You're not worth it." And he looked at my mom and he said, "It's her or it's me." And my mom knew if she didn't make the decision for me to leave, I would probably die or end up very injured. It was just getting more violent. So they put me in my room for about 3 days, and I hadn't seen my dad for 10 years. It was actually outside of the court order for my mom to take us out of the country. So my dad didn't know where we were for 10 years. So I
Wow.
went from Santa Cruz, Bolivia to Maui, Hawaii. Uh, you think about
Where
going to Hawaii
where
for the
your
first
father
time.
was living, right?
He was living there. He had inherited um, quite a deal of an amount of money after my grandmother died, and he wanted to be a musician. He didn't want to wear a suit and tie anymore. So he started recording music and doing a lot of drugs because he just went crazy when he didn't know where we were. So I was at the Kahului airport for about 6 hours, and I remember watching all the people, like the families, like walking by, like they're on vacation. And there was this thing inside of me, like, oh, I wonder what that feels like. And this isn't a poor me story because redemption has come. I just want to give you the kind of the backdrop, you know. There's always redemption in the worst of times. And I recognized him and he was like, Christina, because I mean I had like black circles around my eyes and spikes and long black clothing in Maui. So he's like, Christina, like who's this weirdo? I had a duffel bag and a guitar on my back, and my whole life was in this duffel bag. And we get in the car, and he says, "This is crazy you're here." And I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "I just want a warm bed to sleep in." And he said, "I live in a tent on the beach, and you don't need to be here." I mean, he's trying to work this out in his head. I'm 15. This is like the curtains are ripped open in front of me for the first time, and I'm like, "Welcome to the real world." I didn't come from that, but here I am now. And I don't have a choice to change anything. I had 20 bucks in my pocket when my stepdad dropped me off at the airport. He just said, "Good luck, kid." And I was just like, okay. So we arrived to Thousand Peaks Beach in Lahaina, which I don't know if it's there anymore, but there was like a payphone and there was just like tents spread all over the beach. I have nothing to brag about because it wasn't ours. It was my stepdad's, but we came from, he was a very well-known, well-to-do person in Bolivia, even more so than before. And as a 15-year-old trying to process these things, you're just trying to make sense of everything. Okay, I'm taking a bath at an aquatic center. I don't know what I'm going to eat tomorrow. But, John, it was in those moments where I can, like, I feel like life is all about these, like, lookout points at these cliff point moments where we look back at our
Right.
life and we're like, oh, yeah, I see where you were there, God. And I didn't even know you. And in my mind, I thought I hated you.
Mm.
But I was an atheist, of course, so there was nobody out there. And I just to fast forward, I got back to the mainland and nobody wanted to deal with a goth teen with potential, I wasn't into hard drugs yet. So I was going from house to house and I end up in Pennsylvania, which I did not know where it was on the map. My brother was going to Messiah College after he left Notre Dame. And my brother goes to his basketball coach and he's like, I don't know what to do with my sister. She's in a Red Roof Inn. And his coach, his name was Coach Manzer, was an alcoholic. And I believe that that was used truly in a divine way to have compassion in that moment for someone. I really needed help, obviously. He goes to the staff meeting at his church and he says, we've got this girl in a Red Roof Inn and we need help. We don't know what to do. And this couple stands up and they're okay that I use their real names, but Jim and Sharon Hess. And they said, we'll take her.
Mm.
I found this out years later. They're like, listen, this is not like Mary Poppins' daughter. We just want to let you know that. And they're, Jim told me this many years later. He was like, I always wanted a daughter. And I was like, gosh, just because of well, everything I put them through. So I show up at their home in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, a week before 9/11. And she opens up the door. This is when the movie The Blind Side was coming out. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Of course.
And although I'm not like him, she is like Sandra Bullock in that movie. tough as cookies, but I needed someone like
Mm.
that in my life. Tough as cookies, but just a, a heart of love.
Gosh, I mean, there's just so much in this story. So the first thing I want to share is we all drive by these kids on the streets and view them for how they present themselves today, having no idea their backstory or no idea ultimately their future story. And I would imagine folks in Hawaii and Bolivia and Pennsylvania and other spots saw this goth, hungover, nobody teenager thinking, what a waste of time. And how cool to know that that's not how the story ends. So that's amazing. How cool to know that there's this little church that is connected to you because of some addict and the journey that led him into that. And then his willingness to open up his mind and his heart and his voice to say, we need to do something for the girl with the red roof inn. And then a family does. And yet, even with all this love, it's not enough. You're not there yet. You still stumble forward for a long time. Talk about the turning point, because you go farther into you eventually have a baby with your drug dealer, and his girlfriend talks to you, and like so, there's toughness and brokenness replete throughout the story. When does it begin to turn for you?
Well, you know my story, John. This is a kind of a rare, moment where you're like, I got it. So that's incredible that I love that you actually know people's stories. But
Right.
I know that he was sent to me to preserve me until because I would have taken my life in some way, shape, or form before I would have been ready. So I knew that his name means God has given grace, God has shown favor. And it also means noble protector. So it's like he came to protect my life because God knew that one day something would change in me and I'd be ready, but I wasn't ready then. And so I was a counselor at a university doing the same thing my dad was in a different way. I was telling people how to live their life during the day and just drugging at night. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't have any sense of like a moral compass of anything. I just wanted the party to go on. The party must continue. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's like that's all I knew was when the party continued, everything was okay. And so I get pulled over. I'd been pulled over many times before. I'd always weaseled my way out of it. But this time it wasn't going to happen, which I believe that apprehension is what saved my life. So it was very obvious that I was every red flag that could be there for a deputy or a police officer was there. And I don't need to go into the comical side of it, but it was there. And he pulls me out of the car. I resist arrest. And he was so kind. He was like, is there anything in the car I need to know about? I'm like, so he takes me to jail that night. And I am sitting. So I feel like this was like my first prayer in a way. And I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but God doesn't need anybody to be like in any way for us to come to him at all. Because I just looked up. Now, mind you, I'm an atheist, right? Quote unquote. And I was like, why are you doing this to me? I hate you, and use some profanity. And then I'm like, wait, who am I talking to? I'm an atheist. And it was just like silence. And I went to jail. Can't say that I came out very repentant, but it wasn't until I realized what the charges were. Because I realized I'm going to lose my son, and he doesn't deserve this. So the night before, I remember holding a pistol and I was so scared, but I'm like holding his pistol, and my hand is shaking. And I'm like, okay, what if I blow my face off? I'm sorry, but this is just real talk. What if I don't die? What if I don't do this right? Then what? So I got very scared. So the next day, I'm sitting at my desk and I kept hearing this voice in my head. I was not schizophrenic, but I just kept hearing this voice say, Evan will be better off without you. And I'm like, he would be. And I taught my son this so much over the years. He's 18 now. He'll be 19 this year. And I've always told him, be careful what you come into partnership with. Be careful what you come into agreement with because silence can be partnership and
Yeah.
agreement can too. Laughter can even be agreement. It's when we distance ourselves from that partnership or we draw a boundary. But I didn't know how to do that. So I get this tap on the shoulder, and this gentleman who was a pastor that I was introduced to a year and a half prior, I always stayed away from him, John. I would like make sure I did not come around him. Because I didn't have a problem with all the other religions, but the Christians, I always felt like their project. So I'm like, I don't want you to introduce me to your pastor like your big barracuda fish. Like, look at the goth girl I found, pastor. And so I always like stayed away from them. But he was pretty bold. He said, I have a word from the Lord for you. I'm like, the Lord? Who's the Lord? I've never heard these words before. But then I thought, how would he have known this about me? What I was thinking at that moment. And then tapped me on the shoulder. And that's what got me to get up out of my chair and accept his invite to go to the third floor because they had prayer meetings every day at noon. So I walk in there and it was like somebody threw a life preserver to me, John. And they're like walking around the floor. This is super weird for me. I'd seen rosaries. I grew up in South America. I'd seen meditations. I had never seen people walking around talking to someone who's clearly not there as if they were right in his face and they were like best friends. And I'm like, this is weird, but it strangely feels peaceful and it feels real. This gentleman comes with this Bible. He reads out of a scripture, which is quite well known in the church that I did not know. I'd never read a Bible before. And it was Jeremiah 29 and 11. And it said, For I know the plans that I have for you, not to do you harm, but to give you a hope and a future. And in that time in Israel, that was God telling him, turn away from what you're doing. I love you. I don't want to do any harm. I don't want any harm done to you, but just turn away from what's destroying you.
Mm.
I don't understand what's being said. I'm like sitting here, I'm thinking a million different things at once. I'm like, this is weird. Feels true. How do they know this about me? Why are they touching me? Why are they like, all of this is going on. But he says this. He says, do you want to accept Jesus into your heart? And I'm like, I don't know him. I was just like very suspect. I'm like, okay, Jesus, what they're calling you, if you're real, come into my heart and save my life and save my baby. But right before that, I had this because he told me, he said it was a matter of life or death. And I was like, for some reason, John, I knew that I was going to die in a car accident that night or like the next day. It was like the proximity felt very close. And I would have called it intuition. And it was in a way. It was like I knew something was about to happen. You ever get that feeling, John, where
Of
you're like,
course.
something doesn't feel right? I knew. And so I said, whoever you are, Jesus, come into my heart, save me, save my baby. And in that moment, and this doesn't happen to everybody, and it doesn't have to. But I know I needed that because I was always an extreme person. There was never halfway with me. It always had to be this dramatic, massive crescendo for me to go, oh, I see it now. And I just felt this peace come over me
Yeah.
that I was seeking in the drugs and found in the drugs temporarily or in the alcohol because I wouldn't drink a glass of wine. It was 20 shots, shut the bar down, act like a donkey, and have a bar fight. Like, why can't we just act like a normal person here? No, none of that. Had to be extreme. So I walked outside. I remember the fluorescent lights at the university were brighter. I walk outside. The grass is greener. The sky is bluer. And I'm like, what is going on? But one thing that I know is that my heart was burning.
Mm.
And I remember thinking this, like, this man, who is this man? And John, I didn't need people telling me I was a drug addict. I didn't need people telling me that I was not living a pure lifestyle. I didn't need anybody to tell me that I was an alcoholic. I knew I was.
Hmm.
I was sent people to love me where I was. And that's what won my heart. He wooed me. It's kind of like I tell my son this. I probably shouldn't say this, but I tell him, I said, well, just remember you date the ambassador and then you marry the president. He's like, gosh, my husband's like, don't say that. I'm like, well, it's kind of true because you're on your best behavior when you're dating a young lady. And my son this, I'm like, or, a young man dating a young lady, like you're on your best behavior. You're not going to show them. And it's not that God doesn't have a bad side. He's good through and through. He's perfect. He's love. He's all of that. But he knew how beaten and battered my heart was. It was like a little dog from the shelter. And I'm like, stay away from me. But I just couldn't help the love because these people were like, oh, you need a tire? Let me change your tire. Oh, you need money? Let me give you money. And I'm like, what do you want from me? And they're like, nothing. But they began to disciple me.
Your life changed profoundly that moment. And it began to change then how you showed up in the world. I think it began to change ultimately as you're kind of whispering how other people perceived you, which then changed how they treated you. Even the prosecutor. I mean, you could honestly have 4 hours on this podcast and we would still run out of time of the graces that you've received completely undeserved again and again and again. Cancer, what that has led to, redemption in the lives of those who are around you. It's a remarkable life story. I'm going to speed it up just a little bit because I want to make sure we get to what you're doing today. This is like the payoff. All that struggle, all those years of addiction, all those years where you felt like you weren't enough, you are now able to use this platform to remind others that it was a lie. And for those watching your videos, thinking that it's a lie in their life too. So playing this forward now, a couple decades, when did the idea come to begin sharing just a moment, just 60 seconds online to let people know that they were loved?
Yeah, as weird as it sounds, during the pandemic, I had this dream. I used to be a pretty heavy gambler. And I had this dream that I was like, oh, it's just a little pizza dream. And I saw the slot machine spinning, and I saw an Instagram logo on top. And I'm Latina, okay? So I like to be with people, and we're just how we are. My husband is of British descent, so it's not, we're just different. We're warm, very warm-blooded. So social media was not something that I would have ever looked at, but it's a tool. And I told my husband about it. And when I saw the Instagram logo, he goes, Christina, maybe you should get on. And he said, that sounds like a ticker. And I'm like, a ticker? And my friend says to me, have you heard of TikTok? And I was like, oh, I'm not getting on TikTok. Because that was like, people are dancing. I'm like, that is definitely not me. And she said, well, there's people on there praying for people. So to make a long story short, it was April 11th, 2020. And John, I could feel the groaning of the earth, of like this crying out in people's hearts, help. And
Yeah.
I got into, my master bedroom, bad lighting, old phone, and I'm sitting there kind of like scrunched up. And I pull my phone out and I just thought, God, if this reaches one person tonight and it gives them hope, like those people gave me hope in that break room, then if you come, or if I die tonight, I could at least present you with a gift. Just one person that would have hope the way you gave me hope when I needed it desperately. I posted this prayer. I still have it. I can email it to you sometime. It was just so we wake up the next morning and it went viral. And my husband, my son, and I were like, well, it's not the camera or the lights or the wonderful words. It was super awkward, actually. And we said, well, videos go viral all the time. So, it's just a one off. But they continue going viral every day for day after day, month after month. And then TikTok had some anonymity. So I just hid out on TikTok and wouldn't tell anybody for like 6, 7 months. And we told our pastors, and they were like, maybe you should do something about this. This is what we found, John. lights and all these things, they were wonderful. We were talking about that earlier. Okay. But it's about God's presence coming to interrupt our lives
Right on.
in moments where, like, we may not know it's Him, but He's there to go. The day does get better. There's nothing in the world that never has not worked itself out. Could you agree with that? Everything
Always.
always works itself out. And that was my hope. Like people say, well, I have these great big ambitions and callings, and I love that. I so admire that. But for me, I feel like, hey, I feel called to call, for people to get out of the bed in the morning, brush their teeth, and go, today's going to be a better day than it was yesterday
Mm.
because there is hope for a better day. Things are going to get better. And for those of you listening, we didn't get into that, but I had a court case that could have taken everything from me. But I was given something I did not deserve in that moment that gave me the opportunity to raise my beautiful son that's now an adult, sadly, and sadly, but good. And he's a God of second chances and third and of a million. And whatever's happened, whatever's been, people think like they need a lifetime to change, but it's a moment.
Amen.
It's a moment of just like, here, I take it all. I have nothing. I am nothing without you. And things will get better. So that's,
Christina, you've been doing this work now for 5 years. You've got a couple books out kind of celebrating the work that you've been doing and the grace that you've been sharing. You got millions of followers and hundreds of millions of views. Like this has really gone viral. And yet you said, and if it impacted one person, this was your original prayer, it's still your prayer. If it impacts one person, it's all worth it. So share with our listeners, this will be one of the very last questions I ask, but share with our listeners the story of one, just one person who reached back out to you, or one person in a book line, or one person you bumped into somewhere in an airport and you recognized all the agony, all the groans, all the struggles and missteps were worth it for this one.
well, first of all, I was that one. And in a multitude of people, God sees you and me and sees all of us. And so writing the entire second book was a book of interruptions. And I woke up one morning and I was like, I want to live an interruptible life. Y'all, that is dangerous. Make sure you pray about praying that prayer or even just going on that endeavor because it's an adventure, but it's worth it. And we don't know who that person at the grocery store or who that person mowing your lawn or who that goth kid who is saying, I hate the world that's crossing the street in front of you, or the homeless man that's standing there with a sign saying, need money for beer, might be the person that you give that word to, but then changes their life and rocks the world in some sort of way or brings change to the world that we're all seeking and makes it a beautiful place because it is a beautiful place. And so I say it's all about the one because if God cares about one and if he would have gone to the cross for one, then every single person we meet has the value that he wants us to have. And we just never know who that person is. And that's the purpose of our life is for one. Now, if multitudes come, great. But if just one person you impact because you smiled at them. I've had people tell me I had a pistol on the table and a video interrupting their scroll, just like, it's going to get okay. And then they threw the gun away in the lake and never looked back. That one person. So, and there's so many more stories like that. We look at each other and go, wow, like we actually get to be a part of one person at a time. And we all have that.
And the cool thing is, you and I are talking today. You look beautiful. You have a wonderful family. You've got an awesome husband who's wild about you and the work that you're doing, a son who listens to you most of the time, a life that is the envy of those who know you. And yet, it was a long shot from the 21-year-old who described herself as she could not have been farther away from hope than what she was at 21. And so to me, as I read your story and have become familiar now with you as a friend and with someone that I follow, like it's just such a reminder that regardless of where we are, we're not too far gone. So we have, my friend, 7 questions we use to tether all of our podcast guests together. And I'm going to ask you these 7. They're quick fire questions and answers. So get ready to sprint the final lap with me. But before I do, for those right now who are saying to themselves, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too broken, I'm too addicted, I'm too inarticulate, I'm too poor or rich, I'm too whatever to be used for good. What's your response to that?
The great equalizer of life is pain, and we're all brought to this place where we experience that. And there is no such thing in God of, I am too old, I am too young, I am too anything. Because at the end of the day, we all are on the same playing field, and God can do whatever He wants to do with whatever you give Him, whatever you have in your hand, whatever, a speck or you have millions. When that's surrendered and it's like, here's my open hands. This is what I have. I have nothing or I have everything, but I give this to you. Watch what He does.
Christina, thank you for giving the spec and then a whole lot more than that because it has been multiplied in mighty ways. So the questions of the Live Inspired 7 begin with this. What has been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh boy. The most impactful book I would say is How to Forgive Yourself Totally by R.T. Kendall,
Hmm.
because it's the hardest thing in life to do.
What is one positive characteristic or one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little girl growing up in Bolivia that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Ooh, goodness gracious. I feel like God has magnified it even more so in my life. But I believe I was a lot more creative. I think I was a little bit more wired. But then I went through all this stuff, and you know, I was definitely more creative then. I would love to have more creativity that I had as a child then.
If your home caught fire and your family is all out, your animals are all out, and you have an opportunity of running back into that house and grabbing one thing, what's that one thing you would grab?
Just keep it together here, John. I have a box that is the only box I've preserved in all these years, and it's a box with my son's blanket, his little mittens, his pacifier. As I'm prepared for this question, John. His pacifier.
Prepare to be
And
interrupted. You're the one that offered the prayer. It's not my fault that you did it. I'm just here to help deliver on the ask.
okay, oh, whew. His little mittens, his not scratch his face, and it's just a shoebox, and his just the first blanket I swaddled him in. So
It's awesome. I love that we collectively work so hard for the trophies, and yet when it comes down to it, let them burn and grab the shoebox with an old pacifier and an old blanket. That's what I want. So if you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
wow, there's a few people, living or dead. I would say it would have to be maybe Alice Cooper. I know that sounds crazy, but he became a Christian after being a this wild, and I would just love to know his journey, and I would love to know how he has been able to bridge his faith and bridge who he was and hear all the things that he went through, leaving the life that, or the person, he really didn't leave, rock and roll, but he continued displaying his faith in a place where people didn't know faith. And my heart bleeds for that. I'm like, I love to be in places where people were like me. And, I didn't understand Christianese and I'm not really super big on it either today, but I get it now. But I would love to know what and how he did that and how he has navigated how difficult that can be for someone to leave a life of influence, but still stay there and still be influential.
Christina, what's the best advice you've ever received?
It was from my husband and I went to Bible college in Australia. And I asked this gentleman, I said, so what's the trick getting a daughter like that? He goes, don't let him grow up too quickly and only say no if you have to.
What advice would you give yourself at age 20?
Oh gosh. First of all, like advice, I'd be like, I'd grab her cheeks and be like, stop. Okay. But the advice I would be like, quit hating yourself.
Oof.
Quit hating what God loves. Quit hating what people love about you. And it's going to get better one day. So don't pull the trigger.
Oof. Cristina Baker, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
All right, John, next time you prepare people for this, okay? She loved cheeses and she loved people really hard. I want to love people hard, and I want it to be said that I would leave anything to drop anything for one person, like it was done for me.
Cristina Baker, thank you for praying that you would live an interruptible life. And thank you for saying yes when those interruptions showed up. Thank you for loving people hard, for reminding them that in spite of the struggles they faced, that the foundation is firm, that God is still God, and that their best is yet to come. It's an awesome example, and we look up to the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
My friends, that is Cristina Baker. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift it is. Your life matters. Live inspired.